Okay.
Good. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to come to this event, and as also a special thank you to Robin for sharing her
Thank you.
stories and joining us here at Montclair State virtually. I'd first like to show everybody the agenda. I will first be introducing our moderator. She's also Feliciano Women in Business's faculty advisor and Montclair State's professor, Gail Yash. She will be moderating this event and going through a little interview with Robin. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen just to give it a little bit more of a personal feel so we can see everybody. And Gail, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone this afternoon on this dreary day, but we don't have to worry because we're here on Zoom and we can all comfortably be together. So before I introduce Robin, I wanted to extend a special thank you to Chad Brown, who I see has joined us. Chad, he's Director of Development for the Feliciano School of Business, and he introduced us to Robin. So we're very, very happy about that. Thank you, Chad. And Michelle Ansbacher as well. She's the chair of the advisory board for the School of Business. I don't think she's here, Chad, but I just wanted to bring up her name and say thank you for allowing us to meet Robin, who's here with us today. So I'd like to briefly introduce Robin to you and then have Robin take it away, maybe tell us a little bit about herself. So Robin Rotenberg, with almost 25 years of business experience and legal experience at BASF, Robin is a powerhouse advocate. She was working at BASF and was president of $1 billion business, BASF Canada, and then vice president and chief communications officer of BASF Corporation, the North American division, a $100+ billion global company. She's helped restructure businesses, build successful teams, and engage in employee outreach during her distinguished career. She's currently an author, successful public speaker, and coach, offering training sessions and workshops in the fields of personal, professional, and business development. And Robin was also named one of Best 50 Women in Business by NJ Biz 2018. So Robin, let's all welcome Robin here today and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Gail, and thank you, everybody. And thank you to the organizers of this great event. I know that it's taken a lot to get it set up. It seems like it's easier because we're here on Zoom rather than in person, but we all know behind the scenes that it really isn't. So thank you very much to everybody, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm excited to answer Gail's questions. Believe it or not, it's hard for me to talk about myself. But I can talk a little bit, just start at the beginning and then take it to here, and then we can jump into some questions. I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. I'm the eldest of two daughters, and I grew up in a really nice overprotected suburb of Toronto. So I'm a long way from home. But my first job was as a summer camp counselor, teaching little kids to swim. And now we joke that I only camp in nice hotels. But I went from there to a political science degree, but I always loved children. So I went back and did a degree in special education and did that. I found I couldn't help them enough. So I went to law school because I thought that would allow me to help them more. And when my daughter was little, I joined BASF because they would allow me to work part-time. And I was a trial lawyer before that. It was very difficult for me to schedule around what I wanted to do with her. And I went in-house to BASF through a number of different jobs. I joined as their lawyer. I ran the Canadian entity. And then I got married to a New York City guy who doesn't think there's anything north of the 49th parallel. So I asked to be transferred here to New York or New Jersey, and I've been here in New Jersey ever since. So that's how I got here. I worked at BASF, but my most recent job was as communications, as Gail said, for North America. I left there last year just before the pandemic hit. And I've written this book, Pound On. It's called Pound On from the Glass Slipper to the Glass Ceiling, which is a collection of essays of alpha women talking about positive, inspiring stories about their careers. So hoping to be able to share some of the learnings from that, to take your questions. And I'm really looking forward, Gail, to our dialogue and conversation.
I am as well.
Thank you.
So thank you, Robin. I do have one first question for you. So you rose up the ranks at BASF, a very male-dominated company and industry. Has there ever been, or was there ever a time where you felt sexism in the workplace? And tell us about that and how you navigated that.
You know, I think in a lot of ways, I've been in male dominated careers since I left teaching, and I've always felt a little bit like an outsider. I think one of the things you have to remember to do is to use your voice and to speak up. If people say something to you, particularly in a male dominated environment, that makes you uncomfortable, you have to find your voice and you have to use it. And yes, I've encountered sexism in the workplace quite a lot. Sometimes I think people don't even realize that they are treating you differently because you're a woman. We learn along the way that to be treated equally doesn't mean your treatment has to be identical. It just has to be something that works for you in your own life and your own environment. But if you're not given the good files as a young lawyer in a law firm, and they're going to all the young male lawyers, or you're not given the opportunity for promotions because you're a woman or because you have a child or a husband, those kinds of things that hold you back or that you're not given at the beginning will follow you through your whole career. Because if you think about it, you both start, if you start with a male coworker, he gets promoted, you get a little bit of a promotion. Then the next time the promotions come along, he's up here and you're still like down here somewhere. So it'll follow you forever if you don't speak up and ask. Why am I being treated like this? Why didn't you give me the same salary as you gave him or another worker who was doing the same job? It's really important to find your voice. But yes, I have encountered it. And in fact, when I look back, I've encountered it quite a lot. Sometimes when you're in a situation, you don't realize how much it's affecting you until you're out of that situation. You think, why didn't I say something?
Yeah.
Why didn't I do more? So my message is do as much as you can when you're in the situation so that you don't have those things affect you throughout your career, because they will hold you back for a long time.
I had like, oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Do you ever feel like you were getting numb to it? Like it was just all around you all the time. And because you said you were looking back and you really see it now.
I do. I think that's part of the problem is that we get used to this systemic discrimination or to this systemic prejudice, and we come to accept it. We may murmur about it or whisper about it behind the scenes, but we don't take it to the centers of power where something can be done about it.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's really true. You do get numb. I've been in situations where I've had jobs, I'm not going to name what they are, but when they were given to me, and I was the first woman in a lot of these jobs or in a lot of these law firms or a lot of these situations, I know that the job was given a different title. It was given a lower title. I know that the salaries were reduced. I know that those things happened. And even if you complain, sometimes you can't do much about it, but you can always vote with your feet. You can always vote with your feet, and you can always say, I'm not tolerating this. You have to really, in the course of your career, make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation where you can't vote with your feet, where you're kind of stuck in whatever the situation is. It's hard to do as life goes on because you have responsibilities, not just to yourself. But it's disturbing sometimes, frankly, when you look back, when I'll own it, when I look back. And I think I could have done more, or I could have done more for the other women who were in the same situation. So towards the end of my stint in the corporate world, I really started speaking up much more for other women because I could. I was in a situation where I felt a little bit more like my feet were on the ground. But it's difficult when you're in an environment that's 90% male, that they have an entirely different thought, some of them different thought process, different priorities, and you can be very much cast aside. If you look even at some of the recent statements by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where she said, isn't it odd that I can have an idea around a table and I'll say it and no one will listen, and then a man will say it and all of a sudden everybody thinks it's a great idea. And you hear it from somebody like that who was the Supreme Court justice. How could that happen to her? But it does. It happens. And it's an important thing to find your voice around it and find a way to speak up in a way that makes sense to you without you have to be comfortable with how you speak up and with the things that you say and do in response to that kind of systemic discrimination, but it's baked in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I found when I was doing the interviews of the other alpha women, that a lot of the things that I encountered, they encountered, and it's baked in to how things happen. It's, you know, I like to think that it's getting better, and I don't want people to be, I don't want the women here to be pessimistic about it, but I think we have to be realistic about how hard it is. It's hard.
You know, when you and I were talking before the event, we were talking about that experience you had, and I think it was a golf outing. Was it a golf outing that you were talking about?
Yeah, it was a retreat. They used to have retreats where you'd go away, and you could golf. I don't golf. I never learned, I have to say. But it was a 2-day retreat where I think, do you want me to tell the story?
I love it. Resonated with me. So if you don't mind.
No, not at all. And I had the head of, I won't name who it was or exactly, but it was somebody in a high position of authority who came to me and said, "You're the first woman to ever come on this outing with us, and we're worried you're going to ruin our fun." Now, at the time, I was the general counsel for what was then $1 billion company. So I was their lawyer, very senior position. I was on their management committee, but I was the youngest by more than 15 years, at least at the time. And I was the only woman. So it was very hard to be taken seriously. And my response was, "Don't worry, I don't want any part of your fun. Go ahead, do whatever you like." And you know, today I ask myself if I would do the same thing today. Like, what would I do today? And I think we should all ask ourselves, what would we do today? Because first of all, how did he have the nerve to come and talk to me about it like that? And second of all, I let it drop after I said to him, "Oh, don't worry, I won't ruin your fun." But what it does also is it puts you a bit off balance for a serious meeting to set the strategy for $1 billion company. I walked in and felt extremely unwelcome, extremely unwelcome, like an outsider. I didn't fit in, and like my contributions wouldn't be valued. And that's what those kinds of comments do to us. They make us feel like our contribution isn't worthwhile, and we shouldn't be there because they don't want us there. I mean, it's a glib thing to say, it's going to ruin, or you're going to ruin our fun, but the message is deeper than that.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think we have to really look deeply into what people are saying to us and not just toss the comments off and give a glib response. I had occasion when I worked for a major law firm, I think I shared this one with you too, where one of the very senior founding partners came up also at a retreat where, you know, they were having a lot of fun. We were not having so much fun, the women, the two of us in the group. And he came up and he asked me and another associate, "What does your mother think of you doing this job?" Now, my mother passed away when I was a teenager, so I had something quite nasty to say to him, which I did say. And my colleague said to him, "My mother's an eye surgeon, and she thinks this is really easy stuff compared to what she does every day." And he was so stunned, he didn't know what to say. But again, it's a question of why do people say that in the first place?
Exactly.
It's to tell us we shouldn't be there. You know,
Definitely.
in his eyes, he didn't think we should be there. And he was a founding partner of the firm. At the time, he was probably in his early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. So he'd been a lawyer a long time, and we'd been lawyers for about 5 minutes. So, you know, we had the courage to speak up because it wasn't in an office. But I had my office decor criticized too, you know, when they walked around, and one of them came in, the head litigator came in, he said, "You'd never see that in a man's office," because I had a ballet poster on my wall. And I said, "It's not a man's office."
Excellent response. And by the way, I love your office decor that you have behind you right now.
Oh, thank you. This is my dining room.
You know, on this topic, this is a good segue. I talk with you before. I read something in your book and I wanted to share it, the quote from your book, and then segue into this next topic. So I'll read to
Sure.
everyone this very, very poignant quote. This is from Robin. No one gave me a ladder. If there was one, no one told me about it. I had to climb the walls instead. And some days I truly felt that I was clawing at them just to stay in the same place. I couldn't look up or down for fear of falling. And I felt alone, hanging on for dear life. Robin, tell us how you managed to get through that feeling.
I had that feeling a lot, and I think it's in part because I didn't have, when I first started in the corporate world and in law firms, there weren't a lot of mentors. There weren't a lot of women helping each other. And one of my big messages, we've got to help each other. And, that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, was for women coming up behind me to know that we're here to help, or that I'm here to help. Because it was interesting when you said to me that it was a poignant message, because to me, it was just how I felt. And when I talked to my friends, they all felt the same way at the time.
I do too.
Yeah. So you do. I'm glad you can relate, but I'm not glad you feel like that, because I think it means that there should be a way for us to give our skills and our abilities to the corporate world, or to the world, without us feeling like we're going to slide off a wall and we have to claw our way up to the top, and also claw our way to hang on. But I did feel like that a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think it's in large measure because I didn't have a lot of other women to talk to about it, or a lot of women mentors. The first law firm that I joined, there was one woman partner who made it very clear that she was not going to help any of us, because she said nobody had helped her, which I don't know if that was true. I think a lot of the men helped her because she was the only woman partner, but she made it very clear. And there are still a lot of women who succeed in corporations or in other environments, that once they start succeeding, for some reason, because systemically it's so difficult to help other women, they don't necessarily help either. But I always made a point of helping whoever I could, whether it was with a coffee or with some advice, or to give a push, or put in a good word, because sometimes it's just to put in a good word for somebody that you can change the course of their career if you put in a good word for people. But it does feel like that sometimes, just like trying to get to that glass ceiling can be a real challenge. And trying to bust through it, pound on and bust through it, is also a challenge. And you have to ask yourself every step of the way, do I really want this?
Yeah.
Do I want this? And what am I willing to do to get it? And you can't lose who you are.
Yeah.
You have to really be true to yourself.
And on that note too is the balance. So trying to find that balance. So how did you find the balance in your life, wearing all the hats that you wear as you move through your career?
Well, I don't know if I ever found any balance. I think you have to figure out what your priorities are, and how you don't want to have to be everything to everyone all the time, or you'll burn yourself out. But I do think that women can have it all. I really do believe that women can have it all. And I don't agree with women. Very prominent women have said you can't have it all at the same time. I think you can, but you have to give sort of a weighting to what you want. Like, am I going to is my career going to be at 50%, 75%, or 100% right now? Is my home life going to be, 50, 75, or 100? And if you figure out, and my spare time, or my external interests, because you should always have those, and you should always find a way to give back. But I think if we always look at it with everything has to add up to 100, but you don't have to give it 100, 100% all the time. I'm not sure. My balance for me was, and still is, to have time for myself. I can go at 100 miles an hour if I can also find an hour for myself, or a half a day, or whatever it is that's going to make me feel like I've done something for myself. And I think especially during COVID, that's been a really important thing to do they're calling it self-care now, but to self-care, to do things for ourselves so that we're not everything to everyone. And you don't have to be very far along in your career to feel like you're giving everything to everybody else. Even, you know, even if you're like all of you, if you're a university student and you're giving everything to your classes, it's too much. You have to figure out, okay, how does this look to me in a way that makes sense to me, so that I'm preserving something of myself so I can be true to my wishes and my dreams.
Definitely, definitely. So what's the best decision that you ever made in your career?
The best decisions that I ever made about my career were around education. It was around, how do I prepare myself for what I want to do? And you heard me say at the beginning, I went to a Canadian university, and my first love was political science, because I just thought, oh, this is so interesting. It's a combination of, you know, it's politics, it's history, it's economics, it's the governments on the world stage. I loved international relations, you know, as part of the political studies. They called it political studies where I was. But when I went to look at what was I going to do with that out in the world, it didn't interest me that much. And I loved kids. So I did a second degree in education, or special education. And I went back to school to do, obviously, to do that. And then after I'd done that for a year, and I found all the kids' parents were so frustrated with trying to get government funding for their children, I was navigating my way through all these administrative bureaucracies and thought I could help them more if I were a lawyer. So when I went back to school and went back to law school, against great opposition, I might add, which I can talk about in a minute. But to try to make sure that I was prepared for what it was I wanted to do. Once I got there, I fell in love with the business side and took a bit of a detour. But I found that whenever I wanted to do something different, the key for me was educating myself. And it's still educating myself. You know, whatever you do or whatever you're looking to do, you're getting great preparation in these university programs that you're giving and that these students are taking. And that's the real way to create balance for yourself, because you'll have choices, you'll have options, you'll be able to use your education in many, many different ways. And it's much easier to do it early on, because then again, the building blocks happen, and also life happens. Your life moves into different phases, and you have different things that you want to do with your life, but your education you can always fall back on. And we're a very paper-oriented society. Most companies say, well, what's your degree in? They may give you a chance to do something else if you have a degree. Like as a lawyer, I had never run a business. I didn't have an MBA, but I was the company's lawyer, and they said, we think you can run this business. Here it is. So if I hadn't been a lawyer, if I hadn't gotten the extra education, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And the balance of being able to have that job and still take care of my daughter, that allowed me, the success of that allowed me, I had resources to be able to do things the way that I wanted to. I could travel because I had somebody helping me in my house. They didn't live there, but I had somebody helping me in my house. You know, so it gave me different options, and it helped me with balance. But it always came back to educating myself. And I'm still doing it. I still, when I decided to write a book, I had no idea how to get it published. No idea, what do you do now? It's an entirely different industry than it used to be. So I started reading and figured it out. And if you look, and also in the book, there's a ton of research in it, that's quoted in it about different kinds of things that women have encountered over the course of time, and why it's so important. I think it's so important for women to be educated.
Excellent. Yeah. So they say that hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, what mistakes have you made that you think, gosh, I can't believe I did that, or I really should have done that differently, or maybe something else? Can you reflect back on some of those?
I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we make mistakes all the time. We make them every day with the things that we do in a job. It's a question of how you deal with them. What did I do? Can I correct it? And to just be honest about it. But the biggest mistakes that I made looking back were about people. They weren't necessarily about the skill sets for the job, because I had the skill sets for the jobs generally, because I'd been in either the law firm or the corporate world, or I had taught, or whatever it was I was doing. I had the IQ for it. I had the technical piece. It was the EQ, or the emotional piece of things, that I wish I'd had more of earlier on, because I put some people in the wrong jobs, not really understanding that they weren't good leaders. Or I put people in jobs that they wanted them, but they didn't want them enough to give the job what it really took. And at the beginning too, I thought everybody wanted a big, high-powered career. And it took me a while to learn that a lot of people, especially women, just didn't want that. And I had an assistant early on who was incredibly smart, really smart and talented and hardworking. And I offered her a bigger position. Did she want to do presentations? Did she want to do other things? And she said no. She didn't want anything more than what she had. She just wanted the job that she was doing, and she was quite fulfilled. And it was a really big surprise to me that she was so much different than me, because on the surface she didn't really seem like it. But you do realize, and that was a big learning for me, that people aren't necessarily like me or like you, and that's all okay. It's all okay. Everybody has different dreams and wishes and desires, and I wish that I had known that earlier. And I wish that I hadn't made some of the mistakes of where I'd put people. Sometimes people ask for jobs and they seem really enthusiastic, and you think, okay, I'll give them a chance. And, every once in a while they knock your socks off and they do a great job. But I think most of the mistakes that I can see more clearly now, looking back, have to do with people and building teams and training people. The things that people used to talk about as soft skills that really are anything but soft skills, because you can't get results if you don't have the right people in the right jobs.
Yeah.
So that I think that was a big kick in the head, frankly.
Yeah.
And every time it happened, it was like, oh, I thought they'd be really good at that job, and they seemed like they really wanted it. But that's a disappointment, in the sense that those were mistakes that I'm not sure how necessarily you can correct them without you have to live through it and learn from it to be able to evaluate and understand what makes people good for being in certain jobs.
Excellent. Yeah. So I have one more question for you before I toss it back over to Marissa. What is now in your life now, what is the one aspect of it, what motivates you right now at those moments where maybe you're still trying to, claw or move forward, whatever area that life is? What is your motivation right now?
Right now, I want to help other women. I think that I see an opportunity, not only with COVID, but just generally, where earlier in career women or early in career women can really benefit from some of the things that we've seen. I really missed out, I think, in not having any kind of mentoring along the way. And I think it would have really helped me. It might not have changed my path, but it would have made me feel a little more confident in my path. And I think, I have had really positive experiences in the workplace. So some of the things that we're talking about sound like they're negative, but I think we have to look at them in the overall context of having had really good opportunities and in a really good environment that allowed me to travel and really do fulfilling jobs and train people. Not everybody I put in any job was a mistake. I mean, you have a lot of people who are helpful, but for me now, it's to help other women. That was why I wrote the book. That's why I'm doing coaching. I also, as an aside, started writing children's books. So I have a couple of children's books that are lessons for kids, really colorful stories with lessons for kids along it's called the Glass Slipper series. The first one's about a little boy who finds a glass slipper, but it doesn't fit him, and how it's okay that he chooses to do something else with the glass slipper rather than wear it. So metaphorically, it's about finding your own way and choosing your own path. But I think that for me right now, it's to be able to give something back and to pay it forward. so that I can help other women with the things that I've learned along the way, and to also help early in career women find their voices so that they can have a trajectory that's not so difficult.
That's wonderful. And that's what you're doing here today. So thank you, Robin, for allowing me to ask you those questions. I'm going to toss it back to Marissa, who I think is going to open it up to the floor, to the Zoom floor for questions.
Okay, thank you, Gail.
Well, thank you to both Gail and Robin for that. Now is the audience's opportunity to kind of pick Robin's brain a little bit. We're going to open up the Q&A section. And I think just to make it a little bit more organized, everybody should have a raise hand feature if you want to use that, or I mean, if you want to type it in the chat and we could read out the question out loud. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to throw them out now.
No, I did notice the one comment that came on the chat early on in Robin's discussion when she talked about what at the retreat, what was told to her at the retreat about not having fun. And someone had written in the chat, I would have flipped.
I'm glad that she would have flipped, because I think it shows you how far we've come so far, and we still have a ways to go, but I think that it shows that we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is there
Sure.
a line between, you know, being professional and then kind of like sticking up for yourself? Because I know you said that was kind of like on an off business site. It wasn't really like an office, and it's kind of a little bit more relaxed. So I feel like it's less, it's more acceptable. I don't know. It's kind of a weird area to be in.
I think I mean, if you're at an offsite, I think you have to be even more careful and speak up even more. And it does give you sort of a false sense that it's not a business meeting. But I always considered wherever I was, if I was with business colleagues, that it was a business meeting, no matter where it was. And you would see people, they would drink too much, or they would eat too much, or they would say things that they shouldn't say. But I think it's to keep in mind that it's always a business meeting. You can have fun, but there's certain parameters around which you should just tiptoe, and you shouldn't step over certain lines. But I think that it's not that it necessarily made us bolder. I think it made him bolder. So the response was almost in kind, that he had said something that he probably wouldn't have had the nerve to say in the office. So in kind, we responded the same way. But I always look at it, if you're with people you worked with, there are very few people that you would socialize with in the true sense outside of the office. You do make friends. I do have friends that I've made over the years that I've kept, no matter where they're working or where I've been working. But by and large, if they're working in your department, it's business. It can be and should be friendly, and it should be enjoyable. Otherwise, you know, you don't want to go there every day. But excuse me, but I think there is a difference in the environments. But if they're going to be bolder, then you can be bolder back. Like whomever said, I would have flipped. That's a great response. Thank you so much. You know, you have to be proud of how you behave. My grandmother used to always say that to me. You have to be proud of how you behave, because people won't necessarily remember what a dispute was about, but they'll remember how you behaved and how you made them feel. Yeah. And they'll never forget that. And you find yourself talking about that. I'll say, well, so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that. What was it about? I don't really remember. Exactly. I just remember that they didn't behave. Or they really treated me badly. Now, I have a memory like a steel trap, which can be a blessing and a curse, that I remember all of these things that people said to me all these years later, word for word, like it happened, you know, last week. But it's a good question about how to treat an offsite business meeting. And it's business. It's a business meeting.
Excellent. Got some other questions out there? Oh, gotta unmute yourself. Yep. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Robin. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for presenting today. You truly are an inspiration to me and all the other women here today. I actually,
thank you.
I actually had a conversation with my mom the other day. I never knew this about her, but she told me that when she was younger, she was always afraid of asking questions whenever she, wanted to get a clarification for something, or even, because she works in management, ask other managers what they would think, or just any questions in general she would be afraid to ask. And she told me, like, Miriam, the one tip I can give you is just don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to find your voice. And I thought that was truly amazing, and that personally resonates with me. But my main question is, besides self-care, what other habits of yours would you say helped you get to where you are today?
Well, thank you very much for that and for the comment. And I think along with finding your own voice, one of the things I say is make your own rules. And one of my rules is to speak up within 10 minutes of being in a meeting, because actually, even though it's hard to believe for some people, I'm actually quite shy. So it was a big deal for me to walk into a meeting and, surrounded by all of these people and have to speak up when they're all talking over each other and they don't really necessarily want to hear from me anyway. But I have this rule about speaking up within the first 5 to 10 minutes, even if it's just to say hello to somebody or to agree with somebody, because at least then I found my voice. And that's something that really has helped me. And then also you show that you're part of the conversation. Even if they don't accept necessarily what you're going to be saying, they know you're going to say something, and hopefully they listen to you. But I think the other thing that I did in terms of self-care, because I always had all kinds of different hobbies and outside interests, is I always made sure to advance myself and to evaluate. So by advancing myself, I mean, if you think about it, even in this time of COVID, if you do one thing a day to advance your career, go online, connect with somebody, read an article, try to figure out what jobs you want to apply for. In a month, you'll have done more than 25 things. That's a lot. So if you look at it over the course of time, I always tried to do something every day to advance my career. If I didn't do it every day, I would do it a lot. The other thing that I did to advance was to evaluate and plan. I always had my own internal process of evaluation, where at the end of a day, and I'll do it at the end of this too, but when I had done something, like whether it was a presentation or anything else, I would sit back afterwards for 5 or 10 minutes and try to figure out, was that the way I wanted it to go? Did I get my messages across? What could I do to improve? So you don't have to tell anybody about it. Like, I always found that I needed things that I could just do myself, like speak up, do something to advance my career, plan and evaluate. And if you continually do that, you'll find that you start to self-correct. Mm-hmm. And also you'll know if somebody says to you, oh, you should have done this or you should have done that, you'll know whether or not they're really speaking in your best interests. And you'll know whether or not it makes sense to you. Like, does it make sense to you? It's like, I didn't do it that way. I don't know why they're reacting that way. So it gives you a different kind of perspective. It's a little bit more objective. Mm-hmm. And then if somebody tries to give you feedback, then you can say to yourself, well, I don't think that's really how it looked to me, or yes, that's a good suggestion. But it opens you up mm-hmm. to always looking at different kinds of feedback. And the other thing that I would say that makes a big difference is to stay connected. Stay connected to the people you meet along the way, to your friends, to your family. With the technology now, it's really easy to stay connected. It's just a text or an email where you pick up the phone. It's not as difficult as it used to be. But I think if you do those things, in addition to self-care, which can be, whatever it is you want, yoga, walking outside, any kind of physical activity, or any kind of meditation or mindfulness that helps you. What I found is I always needed a mix of all kinds of different things to keep me feeling like I was accomplishing things. Mm-hmm. And I think those things, because we're not just unidimensional, mm-hmm. we're not just our schooling, we're not just our job, we're not just our friends, we're not just our family, we're not just ourselves, we're multidimensional. And I think if we're multidimensional, we have to feed and nourish all those different aspects of ourselves. But a lot of it has to do with awareness. And how do I improve? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Robin, I wanted to ask you a question. Was there a piece of advice that you would give yourself when you were in college or when you were studying before, setting off on your career? Was there a definitive piece of advice that you give yourself now?
Thanks, Nick. I mean, what I would say is dream big. Follow your dreams and dream big. Nothing is out of reach. And I think, when I was first coming out of university, the big dream was to go to a big law firm or a big corporation. I didn't see too many of my friends or colleagues branching out on their own or doing things in what are now startups. And I think that the world has changed so dramatically, and the globe has really shrunk because of all of the technology. It doesn't feel like it's too small now because we can't go anywhere. But when we can go places, it's follow your dreams and dream big and never give up. Never give up. I mean, I had wanted to be a lawyer from the time that I was a little girl. I got a little distracted sort of en route. But when I decided that I was going to go back, I had a lot of people saying to me, "Oh, why would you do that? You're already a teacher. You have this, you have that. Why would you do that?" And it was just my dream. So, I think you have to really decide for yourself, make your own decisions. Again, make your own rules. If they're your decisions, then you'll make them and you'll follow them. And again, if you succeed, which I'm sure you will, you can be proud. And if for some reason you need to course correct, you can course correct too. But with all of the things that I did, for example, the schools that I chose, the courses that I chose, the jobs that I took, I always had people telling me, don't do it. Don't go to that school. Don't take that course. Don't take that job. But I decided for myself, and if it fit my dreams and my life at the time, then I did it. And then after it works out, people think it was their idea in the first place. But I would just say, never give up and follow your dream, follow your big dreams, follow your big dreams, because the world is your oyster now. You can dream, if you can dream it, you can get it for yourself.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so you can hear me. So as an introverted woman, do you think you have to be aggressive in order to rise up the scale? Because I think that's a misconception. But myself, I haven't worked in a corporate world yet, but that's something that kind of scares me. Do I have to be aggressive, or can I also be myself? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. Thank you for the question. I think you learn to live with your own personality. So I'll give you an example. When I was in the corporate world, there used to be town halls, and the town halls would have, 500 people or more and thousands of them online. And I had people say to me, "Wow, you look like you were really calm." And I was like, I could have been sick before I stood up in front of all those people. So I think you learn coping skills and strategies to deal with your own personality. So if you are a real extrovert and you love getting up in front of people, then that's not necessarily a great thing either, because you probably don't know when to stop talking. So you have to be coached into how to use that skill to the advantage of the people that you're talking to. For me, I was so shy. When I was 3 years old, my parents put me in ballet class because they thought that it might bring me out of my shell, and I hid in the back for a year. I didn't come out. And so for me, choosing the career of a trial lawyer seems a little counterintuitive, right? That why would you choose something where you have to be in front of all these people, or a teacher where you're in front of a classroom? You learn that if you have something to say, you just kind of swallow that fear and start talking. And for example, even today, before we went on, we came on 15 minutes ahead. So, and one of the reasons I came on earlier was so that I could start talking, which is part of my rule that I was telling Miriam about, to try to make sure that I find my voice before I start. I don't think you need to ever change who you are. You just need to work with your gifts and how you use them to your fullest advantage to do the job that you've been given. There may be some things that you just know you're not going to enjoy, because it's too contrary to who you are. Like if they had put me in a sales job in this big chemical company I worked in, I think I would have left after about 2 minutes, because, you know, standing in front of people trying to sell whatever it was they wanted me to sell, I've always been much better, I don't want to say in the background, but much better looking at things and developing strategies and being more on the support side, until they gave me the business to run. And then I could do that because I had a coach who helped me. I did a lot of reading about it. I asked a lot of people I knew, what made you successful at it? So do you have to be aggressive and assertive? Yes, probably more than you are innately, but you don't have to, nor should you ever change who you are. You have to be true to yourself. It's one of my rules. You have to look at yourself in the mirror every day and be happy with what you see. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And that was some advice that I got from, actually from the lawyer who's poked his head in my office and said, you'd never see that on a man's wall. But he did give good advice, and career advice. And that advice was, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And if you're so introverted that it doesn't feel right to you to go into a job where you're going to have to present, and it's not just a question of rounding out your skills, then you're going to have to decide for yourself. I had a woman working for me on the finance side maybe 10 years ago. She was a very gifted accountant, but painfully shy way past what you would expect of somebody who was in that kind of a job. It took about 6 months before she'd even talk in one of my meetings. And that was only because I said to her, if you want me to help you, I can help you learn to speak up in the meetings. I'll just ask you a question in your area of expertise, and you can give your answer. So sometimes you need somebody to just coach you or help you along. But if it's a question of changing who you are, my only comment to that is make your own rules about that, whether or not you want to change who you are. Because I think that one of the things I can look back at and say is that I never compromised who I was. That I think that my integrity, I never took advantage of the positions. I never took a cent that wasn't mine. At one point, a place where I worked overpaid me, and I gave them, by mistake, and I gave them the money back. So I would never compromise my principles to fit in or to do something in a job. And that's something I watched other people sometimes do that in a lot of different environments. And that was hard for me to watch, because again, I know people aren't like me, but there are some things that you expect people to do or to not do that sometimes they disappoint you, but it doesn't mean you should change who you are in any sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a bit long-winded about whether you have to be assertive, but the answer is no, you don't.
Hi, Robin, I have a question. When you were getting ready to write your book and you were conducting all the interviews, was there something specific that you were like trying to do when you wanted all those interviews with everyone?
Well, I had a list of questions, because what I wanted the women to do was a little bit different than what they'd ever been asked to do before. Because often when you have women come to speak, or you go to hear women speak, or anybody speak, they start with the here and now. Okay, you're in this job, sort of how did you get here? And what do you have to teach us from this? What I wanted to do was to go back to the very beginning, to ask them where they came from, who were the greatest influences on them, who helped them along the way, and what kinds of challenges did they overcome, so that the work would be more inspirational than just informational. So I had a woman help me she worked for a magazine or a small newspaper at the time. I asked her to help me develop some interview questions, which they're actually in the book, but I had developed some interview questions, but she refined them, and they all had to do a lot with, I think the questions were pretty well rounded, where, you know, about the growing up years, about the education years, about the career, about the personal life. So what I set out to do was have positive stories of women who had attainable careers, because when I set out to do it, it was right around the time the Me Too and Time's Up movement were really coming to the forefront. And the stories about women in the workplace were so negative. And I wanted positive, inspirational stories so that early in career women or women really beginning their careers would have positive stories to listen to, and they'd see that there are inspiring stories to hear from, not just all this negativity. And that's why I didn't want to give the impression that all of the things that I'd encountered were negative. And the other alphas in the book, because it's alpha women, the other alphas in the book also had all kinds of struggles and challenges, but there were a lot of things we had in common. So I wanted to ask similar questions to all of us, to be able to get the same kinds of answers so that I could distill from that what made them inspirational and successful, and distill it into some common themes. And I also have developed this axis, which I call the Rotenberg axis, which is about IQ and EQ on a grid, where you can plot where you are on your journey of becoming alpha. And I have some tips to kind of give women as to how to advance to the next level. But the whole idea was around inspirational, motivational stories through a series of questions that everyone answered. And I did a lot of the interviewing myself, even though I knew the women. And to try to showcase just that there are a lot of positive stories to tell. And that we gained a lot through our careers, through the jobs that we had and the careers that we built, to try to inspire and to help, to try to show the types of things that worked, at least for us, and the types of things that didn't.
Excellent. Robin, about your book, if students are interested in purchasing the book, where can they purchase your book?
Oh, thank you. On Amazon.
Amazon. Okay.
On Amazon, or else you can also buy it through my website, which is alphawomenrock.com, but Amazon is easier. It's easier, it'll arrive faster.
Okay, so if there are any other questions, feel free to speak out. And if not, again, I would like to thank everyone for coming today and taking the time out of their busy days. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and learn a little bit more about what it takes to be an alpha woman. Again, thank you to Robin. We really appreciate your stories.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you, Robin.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Really nice to see you too. And thanks to everybody who joined. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk a little bit about just about the journey and try to help some of these really promising young women and men. It's nice to see men in the crowd too.
There's some nice words in the chat too. People are thanking you and very inspirational. And so.
Oh, thank you. I can sort of see it.
Marissa, thank you for your leadership in the group, and say hi to your team. And Gail, good to see you.
Good to see you, Chad. Yeah.
Chad.
Everybody be well.
You too.
Yes. And thank you very much to all the organizers, and especially Marissa, because she was doing a lot of the organizing and you did a great job. Thank you very much.
Excellent. All right.